Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to another Mathconnect tutorial. In today's lesson, you'll be learning how to add and subtract fractions. The requirements for this lesson are that you know how to add, subtract, and multiply. There is also a rule that you need to remember, and that is you can only add or subtract a fraction if the denominators are the same. Let's take a look at an example to see what I mean. If we had 1/5 and we wanted to add 2/5, the answer would be 3/5. Similarly, if I had 2/7 and I wanted to add 3/7, I would get 5/7. Let's do one more. If I had 3/10 and I wanted to add 5/10, I would get, that's right, 8/10. Similarly, if we apply this principle to subtraction, and let's use the 3/10 and the 5/10 example. If I had 5/10 and I wanted to subtract 3/10, then the answer would be 2/10. Or if I had 8/9 and I wanted to subtract 2/9, then I would get 6/9. Now, of course, the questions aren't always going to be this easy, and I can hear you saying, well, what if we have fractions that have different denominators? Well, let's see how we deal with that. More times than not, you're going to get questions where the denominators are different. Let's say you had 1/3 and you wanted to add 2/5. Now, as you can see, the denominators are different, and the rule specifies that you can only add or subtract fractions when the denominators are the same. So how do we overcome this problem? The solution is to multiply the fraction by the opposite denominator. So what do I mean by this? If we look at the first fraction, it's 1/3. Now, what we need to do is multiply that 1/3 by the opposite denominator. The opposite denominator in this case is 5. So we need to multiply 1/3 by 5/5. This will give you 5/15. Similarly, we need to multiply the second fraction, in this case 2/5. We need to multiply that by the opposite denominator, which is 3/3. So that would give us 6/15. As you can see, now we have two fractions where the denominators are the same, which means if you follow the rules, you can now add them. So it would be 5/15 plus 6/15, and the answer would be 11/15. So let's apply this principle to another question. So if we look at this new question, 2/7 plus 3/5, and we follow the same principle, that is, we multiply the first fraction, which is 2/7, multiply that by the opposite denominator, which is 5, we get 10/35. And if we multiply the second fraction, which is 3/5, multiplied by the opposite denominator, which is 7, we get 21/35. Now we have two fractions which have the same denominator, 10/35 plus 21/35, That gives us 21 over 35. The principle also works exactly the same for subtraction. Say we had 7/10 and we wanted to subtract 2/3. We do exactly the same thing. So 7/10, we need to multiply that by the opposite denominator, which is 3. That gives us 21 over 30. Now, if we look at the second fraction, that's 2/3, we multiply that by the opposite denominator, which is 10. We should get 20 over 30. So now we have two fractions with the same denominator, 21 over 30 minus 20 over 30, and you get 1 over 30. So let's try one more example. If we have 9 over 5 and we wanted to subtract 3 over 4, what do? Let's follow the same principles. Do you remember what it is? That's right. We take the first fraction, 9/5, and we multiply that by the opposite denominator, which is 4. So 9 times 4 is 36. 5 times 4 is 20. Next step, we take the second fraction, which is 3/4, and we multiply that by the opposite denominator, which is 5. We get 15 over 20. Again, as you can see, we now have two fractions with the same denominator, and we can start subtracting. So it'll be 36 over 20 minus 15 over 20, which equals 21 over 20. So here's a little quick tip. When you're sitting in an exam and one of these questions come up, and you know the rule says that you can add or subtract a fraction when the denominators are the same, and you're in the middle of converting one of your fractions. So let's say you've converted this one, 36 over 20, and you do the second one, but you find that you don't get the same denominator. You know that something has gone wrong. So stop, go back, and see where you went wrong. Because as the rule states, you can only add or subtract when the denominators are the same. As you get better and better at this, you'll find little shortcuts that you can take to answer the same question without having to write so much. For example, if you had 2/3 and you wanted to add 4/5, a quick way of answering the question would be as follows. You know that the common denominator is 15, so we write that down. We know that you need to multiply each fraction with its opposite denominator. In this case, we want to multiply the 2 with the 5. That would give us 10 plus, we multiply the 3 with the 4, which is 12, and your answer would be 22 over 15. So instead of having to write 10 over 15 plus 12 over 15, we know that the denominators are the same, so we can just write it once instead of twice. So let's practice one with a negative and see how we go. If we had 3/4 and we wanted to subtract 1/2, What do? That's right. The first step is to get the common denominator. In this case, it would be 4 times 2, which is 8. We leave the negative sign where it is, and we do some cross multiplication. That is, 2 times 3 is 6, and 4 times 1 is 4. So that would give us 2 over 8. So now I want you to try one on your own. So let's do 3/5 minus 2/7. I want you to pause the video and have a go, and let's see if you get the same answer as me. So how did you go? So let's follow the steps. We know that 5 times 7 is 35. So that'll be our denominator. The minus sign stays the same. We cross multiply. So 3 times 7 is 21. Now we do the other side. 5 times 2 is 10. And our final answer is 11 over 35. So that concludes our lesson for today. As always, if you found this lesson useful, please support the channel by subscribing and spreading the word.